Yacht tragedy in Italy, DNC just plain tragic, and regular Joe quizzes a billionaire, and more. The Monica Perez Show starts now. So I had a great night last night. I went and saw Sammy Hagar, the Red Rocker, at the Forum, and he was with Michael Anthony and Joe Satriani and Jason Bonham, who sounds like a kid because he's the son, I'm sure, of John Bonham, but he's got to be like 50. I mean, just perforce. But I'm only mentioning it because some people might remember that when the great Eddie Van Halen died, I did a kind of retrospective on the Van Halen albums 1 week at a time. And because I live in the Pasadena area, which is where Eddie and Alex were from, I run into people every once in a while who knew him growing up and David Lee Roth. So I felt very connected. It was very fun. They played a lot of Van Halen songs. It was a very down to earth crowd, I might say. It was not what I saw when I went to the Sphere and saw the Dead in Vegas. I know you would think the Dead would have like the dirty feet and everything, but times have changed. There were lots of Cadillacs with Deadhead stickers in the parking lot out there. But this was true to my blue collar 80s roots, I have to say. I felt very at home there. And it was very fun, super duper fun. And if you are listening to this on the podcast and you do not like the commercials, and who likes commercials, you can get the premium feed on Apple. It's just a commercial-free iTunes feed. You can just one click. It's like $4.99 a month. And pretty soon, though, I'm going to come out with a premium membership on my site, which is going to have some live interactive stuff, Zoom calls, things like that. Hopefully you're around for that. And on to our first story. This is a crazy story. It was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It had been tweeted at me. And I mean, everything. I always see what, something like this. You're always going to look under the rocks and see what's really going on. It's here's the headline: Top banker lawyer among missing and presumed dead in yacht sinking off Sicily. Morgan Stanley executive and a former U.S. prosecutor were on boat with tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch. So, okay, the boat sank. You don't have to see a conspiracy there. The news is calling Mike Lynch the Bill Gates of the UK. I could not find his net worth even within a digit of Bill Gates or 2 digits or whatever. I think Mike Lynch is worth a mere $1 billion. But as I started to read about this guy, there's a story there. And as soon as there's a story, I'm like, what's going on here? So I thought, let's see what the story is. The yacht was worth $35 million. It sunk off the coast of Sicily. It was basically a freak accident. So they said it was this thunderstorm that came out of nowhere. It's what they call it, they call it a water spout, something like that. And it just basically took the boat, flipped it on its side, and it sunk immediately. Just went down with everybody on board. The story has been evolving of how many people were rescued and not. A fisherman saw a flare, but the Coast Guard says there was no distress signal. And it was docked near much smaller boats. It was a big yacht. And the other boats didn't go under. So one person on a boat said they were securing their boat so it wouldn't, because they could tell this weird weather just popped up and they didn't want to get hit or whatever by the big giant yacht. And they looked behind, the yacht was gone. So now it's sounding a little fishy. I mean, the odds of that boat, it's a very high quality boat made at a great yard. Boats like that it seemed like it had a very kind of low center of gravity. I don't know about these things, but it seemed like a very, very freaky thing for that to be the boat to go down. And just with this, extreme microclimate, you know what I mean? Like a matter of feet wide. And by some high weirdness, the name of the boat is called the Bayesian, which is a type of probability So I would say by any measure of probability, this is extremely improbable. So the people on the boat were that guy, let's see, Chris Morvillo, who was a lawyer at Clifford Chance, and Jonathan Bloomer, who is an international chairman of Morgan Stanley. It says one of Lynch's daughters, Bloomer's wife Judy, and Morvillo's wife Nita also were among the missing. So this story has been uh, evolving. So at first, there were 7 were rescued, 15 were lost, with only 1 body recovered. Now they say 15 people were rescued, including 9 members of the crew, Lynch's wife, and 5 guests. 1 crew member was confirmed dead, while Lynch, his daughter, and 4 other guests were still missing. So they are, I believe, presumed dead. So I immediately thought, well, are those noteworthy people the ones who are presumed dead? Morvillo and Bloomer and Lynch, like the 3 high-profile guys of the 6 people, they're all dead. I made that guess and looked, and yes, they were. They are the people who are missing, presumed dead. So it starts getting interesting because Lynch was acquitted just in June of, I think it was wire fraud and conspiracy charges relating to a sale of his company Autonomy to Hewlett Packard back in 2011. So for 13 years almost, Hewlett Packard has been pursuing this guy because he sold his company Autonomy to them for $11 billion. It was supposed to kind of be the saving grace for Hewlett Packard. A year later, they took an $8.8 billion loss, broke the company in 2. It really brought the company to its knees when it needed a savior. Instead, it got this guy. So after a couple of years of fighting with their shareholders just to sue him exclusively, they did. They've been pursuing it for a long time. They won some kind of extradition for him to come to the US, and he's been under house arrest for a year here. So this has been going on a very long time, and he was finally exonerated. Now, he didn't get that whole $11 billion. I think he only got $500 million out of that deal, but that's not too shabby. So he definitely made some money off of it. There were other people involved in the fraud, the alleged fraud. The CFO, Shushovan Hussain, was found guilty of fraud, that he played a key part in the takeover, and it boosted his own wealth by, I would say, a mere $7.7 million. But he was sentenced in 2019 to 5 years in prison. I don't know if he's still there, but that was about 5 years ago. Another Autonomy executive, former finance chief Stephen Chamberlain, was also acquitted of fraud charges. So he got off. As far as the other people who were on the boat and who are now missing, their involvement in that deal, because this boat trip was a celebration of the exoneration, and it included a couple of the guys who had been in the trenches with Lynch. So Bloomer previously headed the audit committee of Autonomy. Morvillo, a senior partner at Clifford Chance and a former assistant U.S. attorney in New York, had represented the British entrepreneur, Mike Lynch is British, during his U.S. trial. So, yeah, so I'm thinking, okay, so all those guys went down. They had to do with this, but what could that be about? You know what I mean? Like Hewlett Packard's getting their revenge for these guys getting exonerated, or could the whole Hewlett Packard thing have been a way to harass this guy? But that went on for 13 years. I mean, did he know something? What was weird though is that this boat just basically disappeared. It just disintegrated practically. And the particular guys of interest were the guys who went down, even though only a minority of people went down. But I was like, you know what? I don't know if there's any here, as Hillary would say. And I was wrapping up reading my Wall Street Journal article. That's what I subscribe to, so you don't have to. So I always read the Wall Street Journal. And until I just happened to read the last sentence of the article. A few days before the sinking of the ship, so a few days ago, One of Lynch's co-defendants in the U.S. fraud case, Stephen Chamberlain, whom I mentioned earlier, was struck and killed by a car while out jogging near his home in Cambridgeshire, England. Interesting. I'm sorry, but like I've been reading the Son of Sam stuff, and one of the actual sons of Sam, I'll tell you more about it when I talk to Scott and William in September on this very subject. One of the actual sons of Sam was killed in a horrible car accident, and it came out in the book and other stuff I've been reading. Like that's a pretty common way to hit somebody. They were also talking about Silkwood. She was killed on purpose in a car accident. So anyway, I am curious to know what was up with Mike Lynch. I don't know if we'll ever find out. Okay, what else of interest this week is the DNC. The DNC stands for the Democrat National Convention, but a DNC is, I believe, what they do inside your body when you get an abortion, which sounds horrible. And I heard that it is horrible. So I can't hear DNC without thinking DNC. And then I see this headline. Somebody tweeted at me, and I wasn't even sure it was true. Planned Parenthood Great Rivers used social media to announce that not far from Chicago's United Center, where Democratic delegates met Monday and meet today, free vasectomies and medicated abortions are available in its health clinic, and the appointments filled up for both days. Now, that's a very serious subject. The obvious joke is if it's going to happen to anybody, but that's extremely tasteless, in my opinion. The whole doing that. Anyway, so DNC will now really forever be in my mind. DNC, and it says that the delegates are meeting, and the way they do it, and the Democrats, like the super delegates, can basically do whatever they want. But Kamala didn't get a single delegate. She didn't run, and it's weird because it reminds me so much of how Rishi Sunak, the first POI, person of Indian origin, PIO, in England to be the head of government, the PM, he won basically without a single vote. It was very screwy. I actually dedicated like 2 or 3 shows to that because it was just such an abomination, such a crime against democracy. Not that I care about democracy, but if you're going to act like you have it, if you're going to call yourself Democrats, I mean, come on. So she's basically heir apparent. And I just did a show that Sam put out today on tinfoil hats, which I'm very excited about. It is always a thrill for me to be on tinfoil hats. He mentioned that, and he tells the story in the episode together, but that it was the plan. But some say it was the plan all along to have her installed after Biden. And that makes sense. I think maybe even for him to step down, which I still think will happen no matter what, like, or maybe not no matter what, but if she doesn't get elected, I think he will definitely step down, whatever, and give her 2 months in office so she can be officially the first person of Indian origin and the first woman and the first Black woman and the first South Asian woman and the first combination Black South Asian woman to be president. And I looked up, if he were to do that, even if she won, would she be able to actually run for a second term? And the answer is yes. If you have not fulfilled a full more than half a term, so no one can be president for more than 10 years, basically. So if he steps down, she could still run twice. Here was something in this article about the DNC that I just thought was boggled the mind. This just boggles the mind. Check this out. This is a quote from the article I read. I'm sure it was the Journal article. A 2023 Gallup survey found 63% of U.S. adults retrospectively, like, so from here looking back, this is 2023, approve of the job Obama did as president. Okay, so looking back 7 years, and I always claim that the last guy is always better than this guy, and I base that entirely on looking at the debt. Like I'll measure a president entirely by debt, and it always goes up by a lot. And that would sadly, because I was very charmed by Ronald Reagan, sadly, Reagan and Trump are probably at the bottom of the barrel when if it comes to that measurement. But also, these are people who a lot of adults, up to the age of 30, could not have voted for Obama or been cognizant of really what was going on. But of course, they gave him big approval ratings. Listen to the presidents. The only 3 presidents to rank above Obama among US adults, their opinion of job approval in 2023, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and wrap your mind around this, George H.W. Bush. Was this just a test of names you knew? Was it not multiple choices? Like write down the names of 3 presidents that, and they're just like, name 3 presidents. I don't know, but the CIA agent who briefly ran the government and was probably responsible for having Reagan shot. I mean, well, I don't know what you're allowed to say without getting into trouble, but weirdly, friend of his kid did shoot the president while he was vice president, and he is largely held responsible for the October surprise. And I would say there's actually evidence of that in this great book that we're reading, The Octopus, which, by the way, if you listen on the podcast, you'll hear, I think I'm going to do this forever, a book segment, 45 minutes or whatever, every Saturday morning. You can hear me read, and we're still reading this one. So we're wrapping it up, but it's fascinating. So yeah, George H.W. Bush, big approval ratings. And John F. Kennedy, I'm sorry, like he obviously died because he was a threat to the establishment. And I support that I support the independence of being a threat to the establishment, but I'd like them to tell me why he's the top pick for presidential approval. Trump at 46% and Richard Nixon at 32% were the 2 Americans approved of the least of the 9 presidents, including in the poll. Oh, okay. They only included 9 presidents anyway. And I'm imagining it was the last 9 presidents, which would explain. I didn't catch that because of the way it was worded. Sorry, I try to be thorough. Anyway, it's still ridiculous. Oh, and this article also quoted Valerie Jarrett saying nothing. Given his level of popularity around the country, I think he will be a critical surrogate for her. Speaking of Obama's efforts on Kamala's behalf to gin up support for her, supposedly they've been friends a long time, yada, yada, yada. But here's the thing. You start quoting Valerie Jarrett, it makes me feel like they're bringing her back into the light. And she was allegedly Obama's handler. And I think the way they do it is they bring in these like old timer retreads. Trump did the same thing with Elliot Abrams, Bill Barr, Robert Mueller, all these guys. And I think they get brought in because they're known quantity. They know where bodies are buried already. They know they've proven that they'll keep their mouths shut. They'll do what they're told. So maybe Valerie Jarrett will be Kamala's handler. I don't know. And I guess I do feel like she's going to win. I don't want to bum anybody out, but I just don't know. I don't know. It just feels like that, doesn't it? Clinton ranked just below Obama in the Gallup survey. Okay. So dead center. He's speaking on Wednesday as part of an evening featuring Waltz. And last show, I forgot to say what I was thinking. So I was looking up Waltz. He went to China 30 times. But he's not super rich. So I'm not sure if he's a sellout or just a Sinophile. It's not good either way. But I had to double check because he was in Congress if he took the trip to Israel that Massey said everybody takes, except for him and like one other guy. Shortly thereafter, Thomas Massey's wife died, and I don't think they still have told us what she's died of. And she was in her early 50s. Very sad. But but what it made me think of was, okay, so we look at all these foreign influences. People scream about the Israeli influence over the United States, and Trump was absolutely, I believe I saw a clip of him recently saying, like, it's waning and it needs to be bolstered, But people also freak out about these insider deals with China. And I'm telling you, we have that thing about Gal Luft naming somebody, possibly James Woolsey, as a person who would be close to the Trump administration and foster pro-China policy. We see that with the Bidens. I mean, I've never seen anything as corrupt as the Bidens' exploitation of Chinese money and U.S. taxpayers' money and influence peddling and all of that. But like, my question is there really competition between China controlling our politicians and Israel controlling our politicians? I mean, what's the relationship there? Because China and Israel have a relationship, but kind of surprisingly, China is on, with Russia, condemns Israel for the bombing of Gaza. And I only say that because doesn't China have kind of a vested interest in wanting to justify force because they're going to want to take over Taiwan? Like, I don't know if it's in their self-interest to oppose Israel in that, but they do. So I'm always looking for the place at which real competition is still happening. And whether it's above that or below that, that the conspiracy exists, like, that's just fascinating to me. And I think that is kind of what everybody wants to know. Like, at what point, are the free range, puppets running around underneath the conspirators? And that reminds me of, we picked a name, my podcast with Hervoye. I'm really practicing how to say his name like perfectly. And Parallel Mike. So great reception for our pilot episode of the As Yet Unnamed podcast. And we were thinking of all different names, including free range thinkers, but we settled on cognitive dissidents. So that, I feel like, it kind of says it all. It really describes who we are, what we are. And so that's it. We'll just post it in our own feeds. It's not going to be a different URL, but we are going to do some premium stuff where we actually have Zoom calls with people. It's going to be fun. I'm super excited. I feel like we all bring different perspectives. Mike's super easygoing, and Hervoye has no qualms about being like, yeah, that's stupid. So I feel like it's going to be fun. Because I like that. You really want a little pushback, but not too much. So I'm excited about that. Tonight at the DNC, Barack and Michelle Obama, totally separately, who have separate relationships with Kamala, which was totally brought out in all the articles, will each be speaking tonight, if I understand it correctly. Biden went last night. So I read his whole long speech. I also watched a little bit of it. He seems fine now, doesn't he? Kind of like, he's not a great reader. It feels like he's got a little bit of cotton in his mouth, but he did not seem to be falling down and whatever, pooping himself. He just seemed to be reading a teleprompter like everybody always does. And I was just trying to figure out what was top of mind. Sometimes you can get their priorities, and he hit the normal highlights. Definitely paid some lip service to gun control. I feel like that is going to be a priority, and not in a good way. Like, the Republicans definitely help foster the red flag laws, and that's a very dangerous thing. And it's a priori restraint. It's where Trump said, take the guns and due process later. That's exactly what that is. And happened to be, as I was reading that, I was recalling that on Fox Headlines, which I was listening to earlier today, there were at least 3, and I think possibly 4 stories in one segment about gun things, like mass shootings usually random. They want you to think it's random because they want you to feel like you're in danger, even though the vast, vast, vast quantity of homicides, gun and otherwise, are not random. But a couple of the issues they highlighted, one was this big mass casualty event, whatever, mass shooting in Maine. And I always thought it would be Vermont that they targeted for this kind of thing because they have such liberal gun laws and such low rates of gun violence. But it was in Maine, and they talked about how Maine has yellow flag laws. I didn't know what that was. And that it could have been enforced, which would have stopped this, and it wasn't enforced. And I remember reading a memo, a government memo, saying how, and I think it was Bill Barr saying, or even freaking, what's his name? Sessions. It might have been Jeff Sessions. And when he was in the Trump administration, I think he was Attorney General, saying that they want to encourage, I'm not sure who it was, but want to encourage the enforcement of red flag laws. So first they twist the arms of these people to put in the red flag laws. They offer the model, so it's almost like a federal law. And then they want to make sure you enforce them. So events like this are going to be exploited to promote that. A yellow flag law actually has a few more. So just so you know, for example, under Massachusetts red flag law, any relative or roommate who suspects a gun owner is an immediate violent threat can apply for an emergency court order. If a judge approves that order, the gun owner must temporarily surrender their gun license and their guns. They can appeal to get their guns back. This is something I don't like. It's this: you lose your rights unless you affirmatively assert them. If your kids go to school, to college, you'll see a lot of them have that for the COVID booster. They'll say if you affirmatively decline it, then you don't have to get it. It's weird, and I don't like it. It's like you have to apply for your rights. I think the model law says that actual cops can do it to you. So if a cop doesn't like you, he can, or if somebody's out to get you, whatever, a cop can say, oh, that guy's a danger, which of course means that you have no gun rights at all. Okay, Maine's so-called yellow flag law has a few extra steps. Someone, doesn't say who suspects a gun owner is an imminent threat, whether that be a close relative or a police officer, can report them to the police. You would think someone else is doing my research, but no, I did cut this, but I read like 15 articles already today, so I forgot this detail. It's up to local and law enforcement to take that person into protective custody, order mental health evaluation from a medical expert, and if the doctor and police deem necessary, apply for a court order to get guns temporarily taken away. Then and only then can a court order temporarily suspend a gun license or remove guns. So it sounds like the yellow flag law is less strenuous, but this is saying a cop can make the call and take the person into protective custody. So they're not just taking you don't have access to your guns when you're in protective custody. So you're being separated from your guns either way. But to be in protective custody, to be incarcerated personally, that's serious. And they're saying they should have done it. If they had done it to this guy, bad, 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 bad. So yeah, when he said about gun control in that speech last night, I was reminded of that. And Hillary did a speech last night. I eyeballed the transcripts. Nothing really stuck out to me as being important. There was an article in the Journal today. Doug Emhoff aims to be the first gentleman. In case you didn't know, Doug Emhoff is the second gentleman. Have we had a female vice president before? No, Kamala's the first, right? Right? I think so. Yeah. So he's the second gentleman, and he'd like to be the first gentleman. It says the Los Angeles lawyer will pay tribute to his wife, Kamala Harris, at the DNC. Just a couple of things about this guy. He was a blind date of hers. That reminds me of Hunter Biden. And they only got married 10 years ago. So I wonder, I really do suspect that sometimes these people have virtually arranged marriages, or like they get a little speed dating thing. It's like, all right, this guy's okay with you. I don't know. I mean, that's a little bit of a stretch, I think, but I wouldn't put it completely beyond the realm of possibility. And I really didn't find anything too fishy about this guy. However, he did spearhead what ended up being the U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. And the most worrisome thing about that was this piece of that, which is on the White House website. Whole society call to action. We call on civil society organizations with expertise in anti Semitism to share their information on an analysis of anti Semitic content online with federal, state, and local law enforcement, as well as with online platforms to better enable these actors to hold accountable those who create and spread anti-Semitism online, engage in anti-Semitic threats and harassment, and encourage hate crimes and hate-fueled violence. So what they're calling for, I read elsewhere, is a zero tolerance on the behalf of social media for anti-Semitism. But if you couple that with the legislation that I don't think was passed, but we've talked about it, and a lot of people have talked about it, where it was an anti-Semitism legislation, and the definition included criticizing Israeli policy. So it is my strong opinion, first of all, that no speech should be banned. We have torts that where you can hold individuals responsible for the damage they cause, intentionally or recklessly or whatever, for anything damage they cause with their words or any other actions. Intentional is a big problem. So, hate speech to the extent that it results in actual physical damage would be, I think, a intentional infliction of emotional distress and maybe even harm. Those things you're not allowed to do that. There's recourse, there's tort law. That's what it's for. And it's all there so that we can have a First Amendment, because the First Amendment prohibits a priori restraint, telling someone they can't do something because something bad might happen, even though the thing they are doing, they have a right to do. You can't restrain them from doing it. So I'm not a fan of anything like that. And I particularly feel like the First Amendment is there for political speech. So the fact that we get censored night and day on social media, which is an arm of the government, we've talked about that before, de facto, you can't have a, quote, democracy. I hate that word, but you cannot have governance by the people if the people cannot articulate the problems with government policy, and specifically government policy that violates rights. So I would make, I think, no exceptions to that. This guy is definitely going to make exceptions to that. And let's do some comments, and then I have maybe a couple of other quick points, and then I have some clips from the Rogan Thiel interview. And like, crimes against math really trigger me. So I want to just point out some of the ridiculous things about the whole interaction, how scripted it seemed, how like Thiel, he's either this intellectual philosophy academic, which I think he is, and opines on all this stuff, although I don't think he was super adept at opining on this stuff. Or he's like this go-getter VC guy. But just like Elon Musk, I do not, and like Zuckerberg, I do not see these young guys, relatively young guys. He said on the show he's born in 1967, but I'm just saying, like, he's all along, these guys have been really exceptional in many different areas, both in their capacity and in their achievements. And I just find that implausible, but we can play around with that as much or as little as you have an appetite for. Let's do some comments. So I hope you guys are okay with, and I will come back and look and see at the end if you are okay with it. In order to make this flow a little smoother, especially for the podcast, my producer stars the comments, so I cannot read every one of your comments. If it says Monica at the front of it, I will ask him to star it, but I can't see everything. So let's just hit this. Forest Mommy, hey, OMG, haven't caught you in forever. Right back at you, girl. Jack, who I have caught, he's a regular. He says old deadheads have become some of the most government loving, ironically. I know, hands off my body, no more. Quest Fanning, doesn't a water spout turn into a tornado if it lands on shore? I've seen little, what do you call those, like dirt devils or something. I actually saw some in the desert when I was in Vegas recently. They were teeny little things, like teeny little tornadoes. I don't know. I don't know anything about that stuff, but I would just find it hard to believe. And of course, I saw an article that was a directed energy weapon. I have no idea how to tell what that is. I just don't know. I assumed there was a bomb in there, but you know, maybe that's why it looked like a flare. I don't know. Quest, was it Mitchell whose wife died in a plane crash? Some thought was related to Watergate. I remember that. Was that St. John? Was that woman's name St. John? I remember hearing an interview with her son, St. or whatever, St. John, St. John. Somebody did. Yeah, I remember that story. Quest says Kennedy got all the upside of LBJ's fulfilling of his agenda and didn't have to do the dirty deeds, arm twisting, etc. You think Kennedy would have? I feel like he was out. I feel like he wasn't going to do it. Jack Burton, yes, that Massey situation is odd. No explanation. He's right back to tweeting like it didn't happen. Really, really, really strange. I just cannot get my mind around it. I just can't. I just cannot. Dave says Israel parlayed U.S. military technology to China as far back as the 1980s. The game within or above the game. Very, very interesting. I did not know that. Quest says self-censorship is the most effective. That is true, and it is absolutely effective. And I think one way to do it is if people rely on their broadcast, their journalism for like crowdfunding, you can't get too far outside even the alt Overton window. And I mean, you just have to go along. I think that like main zeitgeist and the alt on the right, that you're going to have to kind of go along with Q and some of the other stuff. I mean, they can just, even if they fake it, even if Big T, they fake like how much money you get, how many views you get. Oh, if you say this, you get a lot of views, you go viral, because they definitely control that. No question about that. I have caught them red-handed suppressing YouTube videos and such. Okay. Oh, I had a thought. I can't remember. Oh, if you want an update on Israel, we were trying to do, I have nothing to do with it, Blinken and Netanyahu. It's like two people on the same side of the tug of war, saying they won. They agreed on some, I don't even think Netanyahu agreed to it, but on some terms that Hamas rejected, saying it's same old, same old. And again, like Hamas, I feel like is just, controlled opposition that of course is betraying its own people by a lot. But in that negotiation or in that proposal, regardless of what it gets taken or not, doesn't look like it will. They had said that they wanted, the Israel side said they wanted two corridors. One, the Philadelphia corridor, which is along Gaza and Egypt, and the other, the Netzarim corridor, like an easement, I guess. And I'm wondering if that Netzarim corridor is the Ben Gurion Canal site. And I'm guessing it is, but I don't know for sure. But that is really an interesting one, because the technologically they can do some wild stuff right now. Okay, let's do this. Oh, one more thing. By the way, this Ukrainian invasion of Russia, some U.S. hands caught in the cookie jar there. It says a private American military company. So these are mercenaries, and they're absolutely representative of the U.S. government. There is no private about it. How could there be? Why would they go? Who's paying them? It's a PMC in Kiev's incursion to Kursk. It was called the Forward Observation Group, had posted a photo of its members dressed in military gear and holding weapons on Instagram, claiming that they are taking part in Kiev's attack on the Russian border region. They were seen wearing blue armbands, commonly seen on Ukrainian troops in the battlefield. So that's us. And I don't know why we're doing that. That just feels like so looking for a hot war, looking for World War III. I cannot, it just boggles the mind. It's like, watch Dr. Strangelove if you haven't seen it. All right. So let us head down this path of the Joe Rogan, Peter Thiel conversation. I'm going to give it I'll just start it out. Maybe we'll talk it through a little bit, and I'll try not to get too math nerd-y. Okay. So let's put this up here. Share the screen. So this was a recent conversation. Let's see what this is. Okay, there you go.
We don't know what the problems are. We know what the problems are, but we don't have clear solutions as to how to fix them, nor do we understand the real mechanisms of how they got there in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot that are pretty obvious to articulate, and they're much easier described than solved. Like, we have a crazy budget deficit.
Yeah.
And presumably you have to do one of three things. You have to raise taxes a lot, you have to cut spending a lot, or you're just going to keep borrowing money.
Isn't there like some enormous amount of our taxes that just go to the deficit?
Okay, can we just think about that question for a second? Enormous amount of taxes that just go to the deficit? That question makes absolutely no sense. However, Thiel somehow deciphers what this guy is saying, because what I was thinking was, are you talking about an enormous amount of interest payments that are in the deficit, or of our tax dollars that pay the interest on debt? Like, what are you saying, Joe? But Thiel doesn't even hear him asking the question, because he probably is fully aware of what questions are coming in what order. And I wonder if somebody's even whispering in his ear. I don't know.
It's not that high, but it's gone up a lot. And
what is it? I thought it was like 34% or something crazy.
It peaked at 3.1% of GDP, which is, maybe 15-20% of the budget. It peaked at 3.1% of GDP in 1991. And then it went all the way down to something like 1.5% in the mid-2010s. And now it's crept back up to 3.1, 3.2%. And
all right, so I'm just going to tell you what I actually found on that, assuming that this is what he means, because nobody actually ever says what they mean here. The Congressional Budget Office projects that interest payments will increase rapidly over the next decade, rising from 3.4% of GDP in 2025 to 4.1% in 2034, et cetera. Now, the federal deficit, if he was talking about that, in 2023 was 1.7 trillion, equal to 6.3% of gross domestic product. So I don't know if anybody knows what they're talking about, but maybe he'll explain.
And so we are at all-time highs as a percentage of GDP. And the way to understand the basic math is the debt went up a crazy amount, but the interest rates went down. And from 2008 to 2021, for 13 years, we basically had zero interest rates, with one brief blip under Powell, but it was basically zero rates. And then you could borrow way more money, and it wouldn't show up in servicing the debt because you just paid 0% interest on the T-bills. And the thing,
isn't that weird? I had just said this in my last show. I don't know why. Like, it didn't. I don't think it was in the news or anything. Just weird.
That's very dangerous seeming to me about the current fiscal situation is the interest rates have gone back to positive like they were in the 90s and early 2000s.
And in all of human history prior to that.
Mid 2000s, and it's just this incredibly large debt, and so we now have a real runaway deficit problem. But people have been talking about this for 40 years, and crying wolf for 40 years. So it's very hard for people to take it seriously.
Most people don't even understand what it means. Like when you say there's a deficit, we owe money. Okay, to who? How's that work?
It's people who bought the bonds, and it's a lot of it's to.
Is this guy an economist? I mean, I don't care. This is pretty simple stuff. I just think it's weird that these guys, Bill Gates, can talk about healthcare, and Elon Musk knows everything about everything. And this guy explains the, budget deficit, because what he's about to say is a little nuanced and I would say a little misleading. But who is this guy?
Americans, some of them are held by the Federal Reserve. Decent amount are held by foreigners at this point, because it's in some ways it's the opposite of the trade current account deficits. The U.S. has been running these big current account deficits, and then the foreigners end up with way more dollars than they want to spend on American goods or services, and so they have to reinvest them in the U.S. Some put it into houses or stocks, but a lot of it just goes into government debt. So it's, in some ways, it's a function of the chronic trade imbalances, chronic trade deficits.
Well, what's a function of the trade imbalance is the fact that that debt is in foreign hands, but it's a function of just plain overspending by the federal government that gets us into debt. Somebody has to borrow, whether it's you, somebody outside the country, somebody inside of the country, other parts of the government. Somebody's buying it. It doesn't matter who.
If you had supreme power, if Peter Thiel was the ruler of the world and you could fix this, what would you do?
Man, I always find that hypothetical. It's a ridiculous hypothetical.
It is ridiculous.
Hypotheticals, you get ridiculous answers.
I want a ridiculous answer. That's what I like.
But
but what could be done? Like, what could be done? First of all, what could be done to mitigate it, and what could be done to solve it?
I think my answers are probably all in the very libertarian direction. So it would be sort of figure out ways to have smaller governments, figure out ways, to increase the age on Social Security, means test Social Security so not everyone gets it. Just figure out ways to gradually dial back, a lot of these government benefits. And then that's insanely unpopular. So it's completely unrealistic on that level.
That bothers people that need Social Security.
Well, I said means tested.
Means tested.
Okay, so this bothers me. So listen to what he's going to say. So means testing Social Security means that if you are not in poverty, you don't get it.
So people who don't need it don't get it.
Right.
So Social Security, like even if you're very wealthy, I don't even know how it works. Do you still get it?
Yeah, basically pretty much everyone gets it because.
See, he was about to say anyone who paid into it gets it. And now, but he just stopped himself from saying it that way. He's going to say it a different way.
It was originally rationalized as sort of a pension system, not as a welfare system. And so the fiction was you pay Social Security taxes, and then you're entitled to get a pension out in the form of Social Security.
Right.
And because it was, we told this fiction that it was a form of. It was a pension system instead of an intergenerational Ponzi scheme or something like that. The fiction means everybody gets paid Social Security because it's a pension system. Whereas if we were more honest and said it's just a welfare system, maybe you could start dialing. You could probably rationalize it in a lot of ways.
I feel like that is completely leaving out so much. And I actually I spent so much time today just like trying to make it simple. But originally, I'm not going to go into all of it, but originally it was meant that people paid in. And at that moment, what you were paying in, recipients were taking it out, and there should be surplus that goes into a fund, earns interest. And if you ever needed more than you were taking in, then you'd have to draw from that fund. It's pay as you go. And I think actually that wasn't the way it was when it very first passed. I think they did say like this is a fully funded thing that lasts forever. Very quickly during the New Deal, Roosevelt, they scrapped that. But I think it was sold to the people as a fully funded thing. And then they scrapped that immediately. And it was still okay because workers were paying in and workers were taking out. But then, not too long after that, they added to have widow and orphan benefits and people who died. And I don't know if people who died got a lump sum in the beginning. But anyway, they added onto it a whole several classes of people who could take out but weren't putting in. And that just systematically made it into a welfare system, but said that it was being funded by this money that's going in, which means that the people who were putting the money in weren't getting it out again. And I will say that right now, so then over time, they had more and more classes of people who had to put the money in. The only people I know of who are still not required to pay into Social Security are government employees because they have these pensions. And regular people would have pensions too. We used to have much more pensions, but the government changed some laws about how well funded private pensions needed to be, laws that are absolutely not applied to Social Security at all, or to even the government pensions, which is why places like Detroit can go under, I think. I mean, maybe I'm mixing federal and local, but it's a definite double standard. And then also they brought in 401ks, which made people feel better about it, even though I contend that that was dumb money. They wanted you to manage it yourself because it used to be that 44% of the market was pension funds managed for you by Vanguard via your company. So it was the smart money and you were going to make something out of it. And I would say, I'd like to see the numbers. Anyway, we'll see if there's anything more to say here. Let's see what else he's got.
And it's not related to how much you put into it, right? Like, how does Social Security work
It's
in terms
partially, I think it's partially related. So I think there is, I'm not a total expert on this stuff, but I think there's some guaranteed minimum you get, and then if you put more in, you get somewhat more, and then it's capped at a certain amount.
And even
And then
that's
why Social Security taxes are capped at something like $150,000.
It is something like that. And also, right now, I found this. It said up to 85% of your benefits are taxed if you make more than $34,000, including the benefits. So that is a means testing. That means they're taking a lot of that money back. So anyway, whatever. I'll give them another half a minute.
A year. And then this is one of the really big tax increase proposals that's out there is to uncap it, which would effectively be a 12.4% income tax hike.
Okay, I'm sorry. This stuff makes me crazy. Income tax hikes never affect the wealthy. They only affect high productive workers. They only affect the professional class. Who've gone to school till they're 30. This is like a personal thing because I've experienced it myself, paying school loans that are not tax deductible, going to school till you're 30, being out of the job market. And then the day you get in there, you're in like the highest tax bracket possible. And they act like that's a tax on the wealthy. Wealthy people don't pay income taxes. They are by definition wealthy. They don't have to work. That's my definition.
Oh, wow.
On all your income.
Just to Social Security?
Sure, because the argument is the sort of progressive left Democrat argument is that it's why should you have a regressive Social Security tax? Why should you pay 12.4% or whatever the Social Security tax is, which half gets paid by you, half.
That would make the tax out here, the top rate, state, federal, and Social Security, I think 60. Oh my gosh, it's like 40 plus 14 plus 12, 50, 66%. Is that possible?
Gets paid by your employer, but then it's capped at like 140, 150K, some level like that. And why should it be regressive, where if you make 500K or $1 million a year, you pay zero tax on your marginal income. And that makes no sense if it's a welfare program. If it's a retirement savings program and your payout's capped, then if you don't need to put in more than you get out.
Seriously, they it's regressive because you're not paying 64%. It's absolutely insane. It's insane. Anyway, whatever. It just drives me crazy that these people are experts on everything. He's talking to this guy for 3.5 hours, just thrown out there. Could you please explain to me the history of the Social Security system and how it's going to change and how it works and how it affects like your average person in California? The whole thing just, I can't even. I can't even. Anyway, super fun talking to you guys. Thanks for sticking with me for the math stuff. I just had to get that out. It's like how I vent, how I just get this stuff off my chest so that I don't have to worry about any of that anymore. Anyway, thank you so much. It's Monica Perez, and catch you. Hey, it's Tuesday. I'll catch you Thursday on the next newsreel, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, live on video, and then shortly thereafter in your podcast feed.